"It hurts so much I can't bear it," the Apache girl said. The lone rancher, the sun hung low over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The heat of the day had begun to soften, but the air was still dry and heavy. Breath. The lone rancher, a man named Samuel, wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted the brim of his wide hat. He had lived on this land for many years, and the desert had become both his home and his companion. The vast open spaces gave him freedom, but it also meant solitude. Samuel was used to the quiet, the gentle sounds of the wind through the sagebrush, and the soft calls of distant birds. Yet that afternoon there was something different, a subtle sound that did not belong to the usual desert chorus. It started as a faint cry, almost swallowed by the wind. Samuel paused, his ears straining. He had lived near the desert long enough to know the difference between the wind's whisper and a voice that carried real emotion. Breath. The sound grew slightly louder, a trembling, scared sound that made his chest tighten. Without hesitation, he mounted his horse and rode in the direction of the cry, feeling a mixture of caution and concern. Man, the desert could be unforgiving. Many travelers had lost their way or suffered under its harsh sun. Whoever, or whatever, was calling for help needed him. After a short ride, Samuel reached a rocky outcrop near a dry creek bed. He slowed the horse and scanned the area carefully. That's when he saw her, a young girl, sitting on the ground, her small frame hunched and tense. She looked no older than 12 or 13, her dark hair falling in messy strands around her face. Her clothes were worn and dusty, and her bare feet were scratched from the rough terrain. Samuel could see the fear in her eyes immediately. She looked startled at first, unsure whether he was a friend or a threat. Samuel dismounted slowly, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. He didn't want to scare her away. "Hey there," he said softly, trying to make his voice gentle and inviting. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched, but did not run. Instead, she hugged her knees tightly, rocking slightly, as if trying to make herself smaller. Samuel noticed the deep lines of worry on her young face. Wrong.
He moved closer, but stayed a safe distance away.
"I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "Do you need help?" The girl's eyes flickered to him, wide and wary. She shook her head slightly, almost imperceptibly. Samuel could sense that she had been hurt before. That trust did not come easily to her. He took a deep breath, remembering the advice he often gave himself. Patience could work wonders. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small canteen of water and a loaf of bread. "I have some water," he said gently, lifting the canteen toward her. He did not want to force her, only to offer. The girl's gaze lingered on the water. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she seemed ready to cry. Slowly, carefully, she took a step forward, then another. Finally, she accepted the water, sipping it greedily, letting the liquid soothe her dry throat. Samuel waited quietly, not interrupting. He could feel the tension slowly leaving her shoulders as she drank. After a few minutes, the girl looked up at him. Her eyes were dark and shining, full of pain but also curiosity. She did not speak, but her gaze seemed to ask a question. "Who are you?" "Can I trust you?" Samuel knelt down to be at her level, maintaining a respectful distance. "My name is Samuel," he said softly. "You're safe here. I can help you." She did not respond immediately, only staring at him as if measuring the truth in his words. Time seemed to stretch. Samuel knew that in moments like these, words were not enough. Trust had to be earned. I. He sat quietly nearby, allowing her to feel that she had a choice, that she could approach him when she was ready. Slowly, she shifted closer, her small hands brushing against the dust as she crawled forward. Samuel kept his eyes on her but did not move. Suddenly, the desert was still around them, vast and quiet. But now it felt slightly less empty. As she neared him, Samuel noticed the marks on her arms and legs, scratches and bruises from some unknown struggle. His heart ached. Whoever had caused her pain, she had endured it with courage far beyond her years. He realized that this encounter was not just about offering water or food, it was about providing safety, a place where she could rest without fear. "I'll help you," he said again, this time with a little more firmness, but still gentle. "You don't have to be afraid." The girl's eyes softened slightly. She whispered something in her language which Samuel did not understand. He tilted his head, shaking his head slowly. "I don't understand, but that's okay. You don't have to speak if you don't want to." She nodded, her small hands tightening around the water canteen. The sun began to dip lower behind the rocks, casting long shadows across the desert. Samuel decided it was best to take her back to his ranch before nightfall. He did not rush her. Instead, he offered his hand, and after a long pause, she hesitantly placed hers in his. It was a fragile connection, but it was enough. He lifted her gently onto the horse, making sure she was seated safely, and mounted himself behind her. The ride back was slow. The girl did not speak, but her body relaxed slightly, leaning against him. When they reached the ranch, Samuel guided her to the small house he had built many years ago. It was modest but sturdy, with a warm hearth and simple furniture. He led her inside and offered her a blanket and some bread. She sat quietly, eating slowly, her eyes wandering around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Samuel could see the exhaustion in her face. It had been a long, difficult journey for her, and now she was finally in a place where she could rest. For the first time, she allowed herself to speak a few words in broken English. "Hurts so much," she whispered. Samuel's heart tightened. "Shh." He knelt beside her and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said softly. "I know it hurts. But you're safe now." Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned slightly into his hand, seeking comfort in the stranger who had become her protector. That evening, as the sky turned deep purple and the first stars appeared, Samuel sat by the window watching her sleep on the couch under the blanket he had given her. He thought about how fragile life could be, how one unexpected encounter could change everything. This young girl, so full of pain and fear, had arrived at his doorstep, and he felt a quiet responsibility to help her heal. He did not know the full story of her past, but he knew that from this moment forward he would do everything in his power to keep her safe. Outside, the desert night settled quietly, the wind rustling through the sagebrush. The ranch was no longer empty. There was now a small presence, a fragile spark of life that brought both challenge and meaning to Samuel's solitary existence. And inside, the young girl, still trembling with pain and uncertainty, began to feel a small measure of trust. It was the beginning of a journey neither of them had expected, a story that would unfold slowly, filled with trials, healing, and the discovery of a connection neither of them knew they needed. The morning sun filtered through the small windows of Samuel's ranch house, casting a warm, golden light across the room. The young Apache girl stirred under the blanket, blinking at the sunlight as it danced on the wooden floor. She looked around, remembering where she was, and a small shiver ran through her. Samuel had already started his morning chores, feeding the animals and checking the fences, but he kept glancing back at her, making sure she was safe. Breakfast was quiet. Samuel placed a small plate of bread, some fruit, and a cup of water in front of her. She eyed it cautiously, as if she was unsure whether it was safe to eat. "Rest." He smiled gently. You need to eat, he said. Slowly, she reached for the bread, breaking off small pieces with her fingers and nibbling at them. Samuel watched her carefully, feeling a mixture of relief and concern. She was still timid, still carrying the invisible weight of fear and loneliness, but there was a spark of trust beginning to grow. After breakfast, Samuel suggested she come outside with him to tend the animals. The girl hesitated, looking at the wide, open desert beyond the ranch. It was a world so different from the one she had known, yet somehow inviting. She nodded slowly, and together they walked to the stables. The horses looked at her with curious eyes, and she reached out a tentative hand to touch one of them. The horse nuzzled her gently, and she laughed softly, a sound so rare and fragile that Samuel paused for a moment, letting it sink in. As the day progressed, Samuel began to teach her how to care for the animals. He showed her how to feed the horses, refill the water troughs, and check the fences for any damage. The girl listened intently, her movements careful and deliberate. It was more than just chores. It was a way for her to focus her mind, to feel capable and strong in a world that had been harsh to her. Breaths. Samuel noticed that each small task she completed successfully brought a faint smile to her face, a sign that she was slowly regaining some of the confidence she had lost. During breaks, they sat together under the shade of a large mesquite tree. Samuel tried to learn more about her, though the language barrier made it difficult. She spoke in her native Apache language, and he could only catch a few words. Yet the meaning was clear in her gestures and expressions. She drew pictures in the dust with a stick, showing mountains, rivers, and her family. Breath. Samuel realized that through these drawings, she was trying to share her past, her memories, and the life she had lost. His heart ached with understanding. At one point, she whispered again, "It hurts so much." Samuel sat quietly, listening, and nodded. "I know," he said gently. "I know it hurts, but you are not alone anymore. I'm here, and I will help you." She looked at him with wide eyes, searching for the truth in his words. Psst. Slowly she reached out and took his hand. It was a small gesture, but for Samuel, it felt monumental. Trust, fragile and delicate, was beginning to form between them. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Samuel tried to teach her small skills beyond ranch work. He showed her how to cook simple meals, mend torn clothes, and even read short words from the small book he kept by the window. Despair. She was curious and intelligent, absorbing each lesson eagerly. Samuel noticed how her eyes lit up with each new thing she learned. It was a joy to see her discovering capabilities she didn't know she had. Evenings were the hardest for the girl. The quiet of the desert at night reminded her of all she had lost. She would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, shivering, tears streaking her face. Samuel would quietly sit beside her, holding her hand until she calmed down. He never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. He simply offered comfort. He understood that healing took time and patience. Or sometimes all she needed was a presence, a reminder that she was safe. One afternoon, Samuel suggested a walk to a nearby stream. Breath. The girl hesitated at first, then nodded, feeling a little braver with him by her side. The journey was slow, moving carefully over rocks and sand. When they arrived, the girl's eyes widened in wonder. The clear, cool water sparkled in the sunlight, and small fish darted beneath the surface. Distance. She knelt and dipped her hands into the stream, letting the water flow through her fingers. Samuel smiled, watching her, knowing that these small moments of beauty were helping her to reconnect with the world in a positive way. By this time, Samuel also realized that the girl needed more than just physical care. She needed emotional healing and a sense of belonging. He began to tell her stories about his own childhood, about the ranch, and about the animals. He spoke gently, never overwhelming her, but sharing pieces of his life so she could feel less isolated. She listened intently, asking questions with small, curious gestures. Over time, she began to respond with stories of her own past, mostly in her language but with occasional words of English. Each story was a glimpse into the pain she had endured, but also into her resilience and strength. The girl slowly began to smile more often. She laughed softly when the horses nuzzled her or when a small chick wandered too close to her feet. Samuel noticed that she was learning to trust the world again, little by little. She even began to help with chores on her own initiative, feeding the animals before he could remind her, and watering the plants with careful attention. These small signs of independence and confidence filled Samuel with hope. He realized that the bond they were forming was not just about protection. It was about teaching her that she could live, thrive, and find joy again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the desert turned a deep shade of purple, the girl turned to Samuel and spoke a sentence that made his heart ache. "It hurts so much I can't bear it." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but the weight behind it was heavy. Samuel knelt beside her and took both her hands in his. "I know," he said gently. "But you are not alone anymore. Promise. I will stay with you. We will face this together." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to cry openly, knowing that he would not leave. From that moment, Samuel made it his mission to help her heal, not just from her past pain, but also from the fear and loneliness that had shaped her young life. He understood that recovery was not a straight path. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and tears. But he also knew that with patience, care, and consistency, she could learn to feel safe and even find happiness again. As the night fell, the girl curled up on the couch under a blanket, and Samuel watched her sleep. He thought about how fragile life could be and how one chance encounter could change the course of two lives forever. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, he also felt hope. Hope that this young girl who had been lost and hurt could find a place where she belonged. And for Samuel, the quiet ranch that had once been a sanctuary of solitude had now become a home filled with responsibility, care, and the beginning of a remarkable bond that neither of them would ever forget. Days turned into weeks, and the young Apache girl slowly began to settle into life at Samuel's ranch. The initial fear that had clung to her like a shadow was beginning to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity.
She had started helping Samuel with daily chores more confidently, and he had started teaching her new skills beyond the ranch work.
Despair. Yet, as much as she began to adjust to this new life, there were moments when she would pause, stare into the distance, and seem lost in thoughts no one could reach. Samuel noticed these moments and realized that her heart carried more than just physical scars. She missed her home, her family, and the traditions that had once shaped her world. One afternoon, as they sat repairing a broken fence, she quietly traced a pattern in the dirt with a stick. It was a design he did not recognize, a swirl of lines and shapes that seemed meaningful to her. He asked gently, "What is that?" She looked at him, hesitation in her eyes, and whispered a few words in her native language. "Bow." "I don't understand, but it's beautiful," he said. Breath. This pattern and the way she returned to it repeatedly told him more than any words could.
He realized that while he could provide safety and comfort, he could not replace her heritage.
But determined to help her that needed to be honored, not erased. Determined to help her feel connected to her roots, Samuel started asking local elders and neighbors about the customs and traditions of the Apache people. He listened to their stories, learned about their songs and dances, and even discovered a few words in her language. It was a slow process, but he wanted to show her that her culture mattered, even in this new foreign place. The girl noticed his efforts, though she did not always show it. At first, she seemed shy, unsure if he truly understood, but gradually, she began to respond. One evening, she hummed a soft melody while helping him sort hay. Samuel recognized it as a song he had been told was important to her people. He stopped what he was doing, listening quietly. She looked up, startled that he had recognized it, and a small smile appeared on her face.
It was a tiny victory, a bridge between their worlds. Despite these moments of connection, there were still challenges.
Difficult, and misunderstandings happened. Sometimes Samuel would suggest a new way to do something on the ranch, and she would resist, frustrated. He had to remind himself that this was not defiance but an attempt to hold on to her own ways. Likewise, there were times when she would wander off into the desert, drawn by memories or curiosity, only for Samuel to worry until she returned. He learned to balance giving her freedom with keeping her safe, understanding that trust and respect had to work together. One afternoon, Samuel suggested they try a small project together, a garden. It was an idea that combined practical work with creativity. They chose a patch of land near the house and began clearing it together. As they worked, the girl spoke a little more than usual, pointing to plants and naming them in her language. Samuel tried to match the names as best he could, smiling when he got it right. Slowly, the garden became a shared space, a place where her heritage and his world could coexist. Each plant represented something new, a tiny victory, a step toward healing. During their time in the garden, Samuel began sharing more about his own past. He told her stories about the ranch, about his childhood, and about the long, quiet years he had spent alone. She listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions in broken English or through gestures. These moments allowed her to see Samuel not just as a protector but as a human being with his own history, hopes, and fears. The bond between them deepened, built not only on care but also on understanding and respect.
Even with these small successes, there were moments of pain.
The girl often had nights when she woke suddenly, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "It hurts so much, I can't bear it." Samuel would sit beside her, holding her hand and speaking softly, reminding her that she was safe. He never forced her to speak about what hurt her, knowing that true healing came with patience and trust. He realized that these moments were not setbacks, but part of a slow process, a reminder that her past could not simply be erased. Over time, the girl began to share more of her memories, little by little. She drew pictures in the dirt of her family, her home, and the mountains she remembered. Samuel listened patiently, asking gentle questions when he could, and sometimes just sitting silently beside her, letting her express herself. Each story was a glimpse into her world, showing both the beauty she had known and the hardships she had endured. But Samuel began to understand her more deeply, realizing that her pain was real, but so was her resilience. One day, while they were walking near the edge of the desert, the girl stopped and pointed toward a distant hill. She repeated a word in her language, and though Samuel didn't understand, he could see the longing in her eyes. She wanted to go there, to feel connected to the land that had been part of her life. Samuel hesitated, but then nodded. Together, they walked slowly toward the hill. When they reached it, she knelt and placed her hands on the warm earth, closing her eyes. Samuel stood quietly behind her, respecting the moment. He understood that this was not just a gesture. It was a connection to her past, a way to honor who she was and where she came from. This experience became a turning point. The girl began to open up more, not just about her past but also about her hopes for the future. She asked Samuel questions about life on the ranch, about the animals, and even about the stars in the desert sky. They would sit together in the evenings, watching the sun set, sharing stories in a mix of languages, laughter, and gestures. Samuel noticed that her smile had become more frequent, her movements more relaxed, and her curiosity about the world more pronounced. Inspiration. Samuel also noticed changes in himself. He had always been a solitary man, content with the quiet of the desert and the steady rhythm of ranch life. But the presence of this young girl had awakened something in him, a sense of purpose, a desire to nurture, and a recognition that human connection could bring both challenge and joy. He found himself looking forward to each day, anticipating the small moments of growth, laughter, and learning they shared.
Even as the girl adjusted to her new life, Samuel never forgot that she carried a world of pain with her.
On days, she would retreat into silence, her eyes distant, and he would remind himself to be patient. Healing was not linear, and he understood that fully. He continued to teach her, to share stories, and to honor her culture, knowing that each small step forward was progress. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace after a long day of work, the girl spoke softly in English for the first time. "Thank you for staying." Samuel's eyes filled with emotion. He reached out and gently held her hand. "I will always stay," he said. "You are not alone." You will never be alone again. In that moment, both of them felt the depth of their bond, a connection built on trust, care, and the slow but steady process of healing. The days continued, each one bringing new challenges and new triumphs. The girl learned to embrace both the world she had lost and the world she had found. Samuel learned to be patient, to listen, and to honor the traditions that shaped her identity. Together they navigated the delicate balance between past and present, pain and hope, fear and trust. And in doing so, they created a space where healing could truly begin. A place where two lives, once separate and fragile, had found a shared path forward.
Winter had arrived at the ranch, and with it came a chill that crept into every corner of the house.
The nights were long and quiet, broken only by the occasional howl of a coyote in the distance. The young Apache girl had grown more comfortable with Samuel, but the cold brought back memories she tried to forget. She would huddle under blankets, shivering, and sometimes wake in the middle of the night, whispering words that Samuel could not fully understand. Each time he would be there, sitting beside her, holding her hand until her breathing slowed and she felt safe once more. But one morning, as snow began to dust the desert floor, Samuel noticed that the girl was unusually quiet. She sat by the window, staring at the falling flakes, her small hands clutching her knees. Breaths. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked gently, kneeling beside her. She shook her head slightly, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sadness. "Hurts too," she whispered. Samuel's heart ached. He had seen her struggle before, but something about this moment felt heavier, deeper, as if the pain she carried had grown sharper with the winter's isolation. Determined to help her, Samuel decided to take her outside for fresh air. He wrapped her in a thick blanket and led her to the small yard near the barn. The snow crunched beneath their feet, and the cold made her shiver, but she stayed close to him. "Breaths. See?" Samuel said softly. "It's beautiful, isn't it? The snow. It's part of the world, just like you are."
The girl looked at him, eyes wide, but did not respond. Samuel realized that words alone were not enough.
She needed action, care, and presence, not lectures or explanations. Over the next few days, her condition seemed to worsen. She refused to eat properly, moving slowly and keeping to herself. He knew she had been through trauma, but this was more than loneliness. It was physical and emotional exhaustion. He decided to call for help from the small town nearby, explaining her situation to a doctor who agreed to visit the ranch. When the doctor arrived, he examined her carefully. She is weak, dehydrated, and likely has a mild fever, he explained. But mostly she needs stability, warmth, and emotional care. Samuel nodded, relieved to have confirmation but also burdened with the responsibility of keeping her safe. The doctor left instructions, and Samuel followed them meticulously. He made warm meals, offered her water frequently, and kept a fire burning day and night. But despite his efforts, the girl often curled up on the couch, trembling and whispering, "It hurts so much, I can't bear it." Samuel would sit beside her, holding her hand, speaking softly. "I know," he said repeatedly. Inspiration. "I know it hurts, but I am here. I will not leave you. We will get through this together." His voice was calm, steady, and filled with unwavering care. Slowly she began to respond, leaning slightly into his hand, finding comfort in his presence. During this difficult time, Samuel realized that he needed to understand her pain on a deeper level. He began to observe her closely, noticing what triggered her discomfort and what moments brought her relief. Sometimes she found peace when he read to her from simple stories or when they looked out the window together at the snowy desert. Other times, gentle music helped calm her, reminding her of songs from her heritage. Samuel learned that patience and consistency were more important than quick fixes. Healing, he understood, was a slow and delicate process. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, the girl had a particularly hard night. She woke suddenly, crying out in pain and fear, her words trembling as she whispered, "It hurts so much, I can't bear it." Samuel rushed to her side, holding her hands firmly but gently. He knelt beside the couch, looking into her eyes. "I know," he said softly. "I am here. You are safe. I will stay with you." She clung to his hands, tears streaming down her face. Samuel felt a surge of emotion, deep sorrow for her pain, but also a fierce determination to help her heal. The days that followed were some of the hardest Samuel had ever faced. Caring for someone so deeply hurt tested not only his patience but also his emotional strength. There were moments when he felt helpless, frustrated that he could not take the pain away completely. Yet he never allowed despair to dominate his actions. Each day he continued to offer warmth, food, comfort, and understanding. He allowed her to cry, to retreat, and to express her emotions freely, knowing that each small step forward was progress. Amid the crisis, small victories began to appear. One morning, the girl helped feed the chickens for the first time without being prompted. Her movements were slow but deliberate, showing that she was regaining strength. Another day, she ventured outside with Samuel, smiling faintly at the falling snow. Perhaps each smile, each small act of courage, reminded Samuel why he was committed to her care. He realized that these moments, though small, were monumental in the process of healing.
As the girl's strength gradually returned, Samuel introduced more activities to help her regain confidence and joy. They repaired fences together, cleared snow from pathways, and even played simple games in the yard.
Each task was an opportunity for her to see that she could be capable and resilient, even after enduring so much pain. Samuel encouraged her gently, never pushing too hard, always allowing her to move at her own pace. He celebrated every small success with her, from completing a chore to sharing a laugh. One particularly cold night, as the wind howled outside and snowflakes danced in the lamplight, the girl finally spoke more openly about her pain. Breaths. Sitting by the fire, she whispered fragments of her story, how she had been separated from her family, the long journey through harsh lands, and the moments of fear that had haunted her. Samuel listened quietly, never interrupting, holding her hand firmly. He understood that hearing her story was part of the healing process, even though it was painful to know what she had endured. Through this emotional crisis, their bond deepened immeasurably. Samuel became more than a protector. He became a constant presence, a source of stability in a world that had once felt unpredictable and dangerous. The girl in turn began to trust him completely, leaning on his strength and care while slowly rediscovering her own. Patience. Their relationship became a delicate balance of empathy, patience, and understanding, each learning from the other in ways that words alone could not describe.
By the end of winter, the girl's health had improved significantly.
She had regained strength, color returned to her cheeks, and she smiled more often. Yet Samuel knew that the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. The journey had been intense and exhausting, but it had also been transformative. They had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty together, and in doing so, they had built a connection that neither could break. One evening, as the first hints of spring appeared in the desert, the girl looked at Samuel and whispered softly, "Thank you for staying." Samuel knelt beside her, holding her hands, his own eyes glistening with emotion.
"I will always stay," he said.
"You are safe. You will never have to face this alone again." In that moment, both of them felt a quiet triumph. They had survived the hardest test of their bond, and though the past would always be a part of her, she now had a place of safety, care, and love. The winter crisis had shown them both the depth of human resilience and the power of compassion. Samuel realized that protecting someone was not just about offering food, shelter, or warmth. It was about being present, understanding, and patient. The girl had learned that it was possible to trust, to feel safe, and to experience joy even after great pain. Together, they had faced a season of hardship and emerged stronger, their bond solidified by shared struggle and unwavering care. As the snow melted and the desert began to bloom with the first signs of spring, the ranch felt alive with new possibilities. The girl helped plant new seeds in the garden, her small hands working the soil with care. Samuel watched her, feeling pride and hope. The journey was far from over, but the hardest part had been faced, and they had done it together. Each day brought new challenges, but they now faced them with strength, trust, and the knowledge that they would never be alone again. Spring had finally returned to the desert. The snow had melted, leaving behind patches of green grass and tiny flowers that peeked out from the earth, bringing color back to the once gray landscape. The sun shone warmly, and the air smelled fresh with the scent of new growth. For the first time in many months, the ranch felt truly alive. Rasps, Samuel noticed it in the soft hum of the bees, the chirping of birds, and most importantly, in the young Apache girl who now moved with confidence and curiosity across the property. The girl had changed greatly over the past months. She walked taller, her eyes brighter, and her laughter came freely now, echoing through the ranch. It was a sound Samuel had longed to hear, a sign that her spirit, once heavy with fear and pain, was beginning to heal. Rest. She spent her mornings helping with the animals, her small hands gentle but capable as she fed the chickens, brushed the horses, and filled the water troughs. Samuel watched her with pride, realizing that the girl was no longer only a survivor of her past, but a young person ready to embrace the present. One day, Samuel suggested they work together on the garden they had started months ago. The girl's eyes lit up at the idea. They chose a small patch of land near the house, rich with the promise of new life, and began planting seeds. But Samuel taught her how to space the plants properly, how to water them gently, and how to care for the soil. She listened intently, asking questions and laughing when a small bird came to peck at the seeds. Over time, the garden became a symbol of their shared effort and hope, a place where the girl could see that life, even after hardship, could grow beautiful again. As the days passed, the girl began to embrace both her past and her present. Samuel encouraged her to remember her Apache heritage, teaching her small songs and phrases he had learned from neighbors and elders. Sometimes she would hum melodies from her childhood while working in the garden or feeding the animals. Other times she would tell Samuel about her old home, her family, and the mountains she remembered, painting vivid pictures with her words and gestures. Samuel listened with patience, understanding that her culture and memories were an essential part of her identity. One afternoon, they decided to visit a nearby hill she had mentioned before, a place that reminded her of home. She led Samuel carefully along the winding path, stopping occasionally to point out plants or rocks that held significance. When they reached the top, she knelt and placed her hands on the earth, closing her eyes. Samuel stood quietly behind her, respecting the moment. Prime. He understood that this connection to the land was part of her healing. The girl finally smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reflected the peace she was beginning to feel. Life at the ranch settled into a steady rhythm. The girl's days were filled with learning, helping, and discovering small joys in the world around her. Samuel continued to teach her, not just practical skills, but also lessons about trust, patience, and resilience. He showed her how to care for herself, how to face challenges without fear, and how to find joy in simple moments. Slowly, the weight of her past began to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging and security. Evenings became a special time for them. They would sit together by the fireplace, sharing stories and memories. The girl would sometimes retell tales from her childhood, blending them with experiences from the ranch. Samuel would listen, fascinated by her resilience and the depth of her imagination. They laughed together, shared quiet moments of reflection, and slowly built a bond that was stronger than any fear or pain that had come before. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, the girl looked at Samuel and spoke clearly, her voice steady. "I am happy here," she said. Breath. Samuel's eyes glistened. "I am glad," he replied softly. "You deserve happiness. You have been so strong." She nodded, a calmness settling over her that had not been there in the early months. She had faced her pain, learned to trust, and found a safe place to grow. The seasons continued to change, and the girl flourished. Made indestructively, suggesting small improvements to the ranch, helping neighbors, and even teaching some of the younger children in town what she had learned. Samuel watched with pride, amazed at how far she had come. From a frightened fragile, she had transformed into a confident, capable young girl who understood that life could hold beauty even after pain. Their garden flourished as well, filled with vegetables, flowers, and small herbs. Each plant was a testament to patience, care, and growth, just like the girl herself. Samuel often remarked how much the garden reminded him of her, how she had endured harsh winters and dark times, yet had emerged stronger, full of life and promise.
Together they tended the garden, laughed at mistakes, and celebrated each small success.
It became a shared project, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that life could blossom, even after hardship. One morning, as they prepared for the day, the girl turned to Samuel with a thoughtful expression. "I want to learn more," she said. Samuel smiled. "There is so much to learn, and I will be here to help you every step of the way." She nodded eagerly, ready to embrace the future with curiosity and courage. He realized that their journey together had not only healed her, but had also transformed him. He had learned patience, compassion, and the profound impact of being there for someone in need. As spring gave way to summer, the ranch was alive with activity and warmth. The girl had grown into a confident, joyful presence, and Samuel had found companionship and purpose beyond the solitude he had once cherished. They had built a life together, one that honored the past while embracing the present and looking forward to the future. The hardships they had faced were now memories that strengthened their bond rather than weighed them down. One evening, under the vast desert sky filled with stars, the girl leaned against Samuel and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Samuel held her hand and smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment.
"You do not need to thank me.
he said.
We are family now, and I will always be here for you.
She nodded, her eyes shining with trust, love, and gratitude.
In that moment, they both understood that their journey, filled with pain, healing, and discovery, had led them to something far more profound: connection, resilience, and hope.
The ranch had become more than a home. It was a sanctuary, a place where the girl could grow and thrive, where Samuel could care and teach, and where both of them could face the world together. Breath. Their days were filled with work, laughter, learning, and small celebrations of life's beauty. Each sunrise and sunset reminded them of how far they had come and how much they had endured together. As the story drew to a close, the girl walked through the garden, touching each plant gently and smiling at the life she had helped nurture.
Samuel watched her, feeling pride, hope, and love.
She had faced pain, loss, and fear, yet she had survived and grown, and he had learned that the human heart, when given care and trust, could heal in ways that were miraculous and enduring. The desert, once vast and lonely, now felt alive with possibility. The garden bloomed, the animals thrived, and the young girl had found a place where she could belong. Breaths. Samuel knew that life would always have challenges, but he also knew that together they could face anything. And for the first time in a long while, both of them felt truly at peace, filled with gratitude for the journey they had shared and the hope of a future bright with promise.